Okay, so this week I have three sets of notes that I uploaded for you, and one of them is on adolescence, one of them is on peers, and one of them is on schools. And then uh, next week we'll talk about later stages of life, adulthood, and end of life. I know there's a lot of sub-stages with those. Um, but I wanted to make it through the theoretical part of the course and then talk about more uh, general, um, I don't really want to call them stages, but uh, we talked about early years in a lot of the theories, and now we're going to talk about adolescence, peers, schooling. Then we're going to talk about uh, adulthood and later adulthood. So um, I know that it may not be as interesting, but I thought it might be helpful um, to share my screens um, as I go through these different topics. And then you can just follow along with the notes. I'm sorry, I'll read a lot of it, but then I'll be able to highlight and talk about some of the aspects of these notes as we go through them. So um, so you can download them and keep them as a study guide, but uh, you don't have to read through the notes. We'll do it. We'll do it together. Okay, so the first set of notes, and the topic is adolescence, biological foundations, puberty, and health. I found that even though a lot of clients that I see, well, they're all ages, there are certain times in our lives where um, where there is more confusion or more issues, and adolescence happens to be one of those time periods in our life. And my my kids are 2 years old to 11 years old, and although I love seeing them move through their development, I don't know how I'm feeling about adolescence. It is not an easy time for any person. It's a time of life transition from childhood to adulthood. But let's look through sometimes adolescents just need somebody to talk to who is not a parent or guardian. And that's okay. So one of the most amazing aspects of human genetics is the diversity that the combining of two individuals' DNA provides. Um, Evolutionary psychology takes natural selection a step further. David Buss, don't know if that's Buse or Buss, but believes that evolution not only decides our physical appearance, but our decision-making processes, aggression, fears, mating patterns as well. Of course, I would say, he's on this whole nature versus nurture thing. I think it's a combination, um, but we often don't realize the impact of both genetics and uh, and environment. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that next name. I'll just say and Schmidt. Uh, look at stress and resilience in adolescence. They argue. So resilience, that's something we talk a lot about in the Red Cross. Um, Resiliency. Uh, when people encounter problems in life or have setbacks or obstacles, how resilient are they? And why are some people more resilient than others? Well, some of that's genetic, some of it is learned. Um, but resiliency is key uh, to well being. But they argue that many of the changes in the last 200 to 2,000 years do not allow adolescents to express their ingrained traits. This then causes stress. And some important questions to ask regarding adolescents who are experiencing problems might include: is the adolescent stifled physically or sexually? Does the adolescent have appropriate responsibilities and meaningful challenges? Is the adolescent being adequately integrated into the adult world? How much control does the adolescent have? Um, these are always important questions because um, the adolescent is always feeling a struggle between uh, people saying you're not an adult yet or act like an adult. And, you know, this has changed. The age of adulthood has really changed as society has moved forward. Um, so uh, now we see, adulthood usually being around 18, but we know that, 21 is the age to drink. Um, 18 is the age to be drafted. I never understood that. It should be one or the other. Um, and, and voting, of course. Driving a car is younger. So we have all of these ages, and there's no explanation why one age and not another. I think it should be 21 for everything. But, uh, that's me. I'm a little more cautious, I guess. But there's always this feeling of uh, miscommunication, or you say one thing and then you say something different, and you want me to act like an adult, but then you treat me like a child. And, what is it? Um, so there's a lot of confusion in the messages that adolescents get. I really do think that responsibility, appropriate responsibility, meaningful challenges, being integrated into the adult world, and having a sense of control over decisions and their own lives is important. Helpful factors in resilience include cognitive ability, family with a caring adult, and external support. Um, Paul Baltes from the Berlin School believed that evolutionary benefits are only optimal until midlife during the selection process for two reasons that are similar. This is kind of interesting. So, people mate before genetic problems of later life can be seen. So, people have children, uh, before a lot of the genetic problems of later life are even known. So they pass those traits on. Previously, people died at a much earlier age, so they never knew about a lot of those later genetic traits. Everything happened at a younger age. Heredity is the process of passing genetic material from one generation to the next. The nucleus of each human cell contains 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs from each parent. DNA, I probably pronounced this wrong, deoxyribonucleic acid, forms a double helix strand. Genes are short segments of DNA. The Human Genome Project, this happened during our own lifetime, because many genes carry diseases such as Huntington's, Lou Gehrig's, etc. Scientists feel that they may be able to edit or change genetic material, and they've already started explorations in that area. Recently, there have been great strides in assisted reproduction and genetic disorders and conditions at all different stages of reproduction. A genotype is a person's genetic heritage, our actual genetic material. Not all of these millions of aspects can actually be observed or measured. Even though we have mapped the human genome, we don't know what each part of our DNA does, or what every gene does. But there are lots of genotype programs out there. So like, I think there's 3 primary ones where you can give them a sample of saliva and they can trace your genetic heritage or genetic background back pretty far. I've known people who have done all 3 and had some mixed results, but close in the overall average. And I'm just wondering, have any of you tried any of these genetic heritage offerings? And would you mind sharing that experience with us? Behavioral geneticists discuss 3 types of environmental interactions with genotypes. Passive genotype, genetic parents provide a rearing environment for the child. Evocative genotype, child's genotype elicits environmental responses. Active genotype, children seek out compatible environments, finding one's niche. A phenotype is the way an individual's genotype is expressed in observed and measurable characteristics. These would include height, weight, eye color, etc. There can be a range of phenotypes for each genotype. The reaction range is the range of possible phenotypes for each genotype, suggesting the environment's restrictiveness or enrichment. Genotypes may also have characteristics that the environment cannot change. Canalization is the process by which characteristics take a narrow path or developmental course. Apparently, preservative forces help to protect or buffer the person from environmental extremes. Some infants can experience malnutrition but show appropriate growth and adjustment later in life. Behavioral geneticists study twins to determine the degree and nature of behavior's hereditary basis, and these would be identical twins. Identical twins are monozygotic. When a single egg divides, fraternal twins are dizygotic when there are separate eggs and sperm. One study did find that biological parents' IQs were better predictors of children's IQs than adoptive parents' IQs. That may also play into the environment that the parents are able to provide as well. However, there are many studies showing a wide variety of results. Temperament, goodness of fit model suggests that the adolescent's adaptation is best when there is a congruence or match between the adolescent's temperament and the demands of the social environment. Of course, that makes sense. Expectations from parents, peers, teachers, etc. Puberty is a period of rapid physical maturation involving hormonal and bodily changes that occur primarily during early adolescence. In the United States and European countries, the age of onset for puberty has declined due to genetics, better nutrition, and health care for females. The time of first menstruation is called menarche or menarche. This has fallen from age 17 to around 13 years old. That is a drastic change. So it can range from 9 to 17. For females, body weight between 103 and 109 can also trigger for menarche to continue. Body fat should be maintained at 17% of the total body weight. Dieting and exercise can interfere with this process, especially if a female is heavily into sports and they have an extremely low body fat content. Now, here's some interesting things. They do studies in wastewater, and they look to see what is in that wastewater in different cities and towns in different countries. And they have found, because then that water is reused many times, and you can filter out many of the hazardous parts of the waste, but you can't filter out everything. So they measure things like birth control, hormones, the antibiotics that are given to both cattle and humans. They measure the content of SSRIs in wastewater, but some of that makes its way back into drinking water. And they do tests on how much is acceptable and not, and especially when you're talking about hormones and things like that. Some of that may influence these statistics as well, because at one point, of course, none of that was in our drinking water. Physical chemicals contributing to puberty. Hormones are secreted by the endocrine glands and carried through the body by the bloodstream. The endocrine glands include the hypothalamus in a higher portion of the brain, regulated eating, drinking, and sex. Cosmo's my cat. Pituitary gland. Located in the brain, it controls growth and other glands. It releases gonadotropins that stimulate the testes and ovaries, as well as interacts with the thyroid in the neck region to impact skeletal growth. So I did have a friend who, as a young child, was not growing, and she would have been very small. However, they took pituitary glands from cadavers and transformed them into medication. And she took those. She was one of the first people to ever take these. And she is still very small, but what would be considered a normal body size for her age. So it did create growth. Gonads, sex glands, testes in males, and ovaries in females. There are two types of hormones important in puberty. Androgens, the main class of male hormones, including testosterone, which helps to regulate height, genital development, and voice changes. Estrogens, the main class of female hormones, including estradiol, um, which helps to regulate skeletal breast and uterine development. Both hormones are present in both boys and girls to differing degrees. Current studies are looking at the ways hormone levels impact our psychological functioning. However, environment, nutrition, and health also affect hormone levels. There is quite a difference between the age of 9 and 17, variations in puberty. I'm just deleting these page numbers because there are multiple editions of the book. I don't want anybody to be confused, but let's see. The what other events can concern children going through puberty? Well, wet dreams, erections, hair growth, body growth, so many different changes going on. Pubertal change begins earlier in females than for males. Some signs can be seen in females as early as 7 or 8. In males, the sequence can begin between 10 and 13 and a half. Body image in our society is very important because people want to be accepted. I think our society plays too much of a role on body image, and I think it becomes a problem for many young people. I think this could change if we wanted it to. It leads to believing that we have to look or act a certain way in order to be accepted, instead of believing that we deserve unconditional love and positive regard and acceptance. The story of Andrew's armpit hair. So I knew this family. I was friends with this family, and my friend's younger brother, Andrew, was having an emotional crisis because all the other kids, all the other males in his grade had armpit hair. This is just an example, It's a funny example. And I tried talking with him, guy to guy, I was a young guy at that point, and I'm like, don't worry about it, all of this stuff will happen. And he just wasn't having it. So I got my hair cut, and I saved some of the hair and put it in an envelope and labeled it armpit hair and gave it to him. And he found it amusing. I wouldn't have kidded him about it if it would have hurt him in any way, but it kind of put a lighter mood to the whole thing. And but just these little things could have an impact on people. And then when we're talking about any type of physical image or body image, it can affect people and cause some problems. And I just think that part of counseling is really helping people to feel accepted unconditionally, and to facilitate that acceptance of self as well. What kind of issues can we expect from students or clients? How can we make it more positive experience? What's our role as teachers or counselors? The leading causes of death in adolescence are accidents, suicide, and homicide. All of these are regulated many times by impulse control. And adolescents are lacking in impulse control, not because they haven't learned it per se, but because they have not developed it chemically or in their brains to the same degree as an adult. All right, that is our first set of notes. Our second set is on peers. Now, when we talk about peers, I think this is such an important subject because at some point, well, in the beginning, parents are very influential, and so are brothers and sisters. But at some point, and it's usually the beginning of adolescence, peers' influence becomes more important than parental influence. And that's why it's so important to have healthy peer groups. So peers are children or adolescents who are of about the same age or maturity level. Peer interactions occupy a large part of the adolescent's daily time. Anna Freud studied 6 children from different families who banded together after their parents were killed in World War II. Intensive peer attachment was observed. The children were a tightly knit group, dependent on one another and aloof with outsiders. Even though deprived of parental care, they became neither delinquent nor psychotic. That's one of the earlier studies on peer groups. Social isolation, on the other hand, is linked to delinquency, drinking, depression. The quality of peer relations also affects the development of adolescents and their success in the future. Rejection by peers can lead to feelings of loneliness or hostility. It's difficult to find where we fit in, to make friends, to find peers that accept us, that are healthy for us. My kids, we homeschool our children, and one of the things we continually think about is the socialization process, finding that balance. Just because you are social doesn't mean it is healthy either. It has to be appropriate. So, for instance, somebody might be in school, they might experience bullying. Well, that's definitely not healthy. Peers may be hurtful. So it has to be healthy socialization. Parent-peer linkages and secure attachment to parents is related to the adolescent's positive peer relations. Piaget and Sullivan stressed that it is through peer interactions that children learn the symmetrical reciprocity mode of relationships. Sullivan continues saying that it is through forming close bonds with selected friends that children learn to be sensitive and skilled partners, which is later translated into dating. Conformity occurs when individuals adopt the attitudes or behavior of others because of real or imagined pressure from them. Nonconformity occurs when individuals know what people around them expect, but do not use those expectations to guide their behavior. Anti-conformity occurs when individuals react counter to a group's expectations and deliberately move away from the actions or beliefs of the group advocates. The interesting thing is there's very little that is really anti-conformity. In fact, as you look at a high school lunchroom and all the different tables, of course, you've got the different types of sports and cheerleaders and band and symphony and the chess players and, the all the different cliques, you might say, or peer groups. And of course, you have the uh, the rebels, and they all tend to dress alike, you know. And although they feel rebellious, so even the rebel group is still a conforming group. Um, True anti-conformists probably don't fit in well with groups. Developmentalists list 3 types of children who have a different status than popular children. Neglected children are infrequently nominated as a best friend but are not disliked by their peers. Rejected children are infrequently nominated as a best friend and are actively disliked by their peers. Controversial children are frequently nominated both as a best friend and as being disliked. Conglomerate strategies for improving social skills, also referred to as coaching, involves the use of a combination of techniques rather than a single approach to improve adolescent social skills. For example, problem-solving steps modeled by teachers. Stop, calm down, think before you act. Go over the problem, state how you feel, set a positive goal, think of lots of solutions, plan ahead for the consequences, go ahead and try the best plan. We created an entire stop and think program based on these and made it school-wide, so all of the classrooms had the same language and expectations for the students when I was a school counselor. And this is easier said than done, but it's all about stopping to think before acting, catching the impulse before following through. If you can do that, that's the key to all the rest. Other examples include training in ways to participate fully in cooperative group training. Bullying, one of the biggest problems, not only in school, but in society. I would say at all ages. I've talked with people who were bullies in elementary school, high school, and now as adults. Sometimes people change. Sometimes the bullying takes on new nuances as an adult. In one recent study, South Carolina middle schools, 1 out of 4 students reported that they had been bullied several times in a 3-month period, and 1 in 10 reported at least once a week. I think it's much higher than that. They're just not reporting. And of course, bullies have their own issues. Why are they bullying? Well, they have their own issues to deal with. They're just not handling them appropriately. Some studies show that, and it's often, problems at home. Some studies show that adolescents who maintain a very close parental bond are more often victimized by bullying, and other studies show that those who have intrusive, demanding, and unresponsive parents are more subject to bullying. Also at a risk are those who are withdrawn, physically weak, or rejected by peers. Those who maintained a close friendship with another were less prone to be bullied. Strength in numbers. Bullying can have short and long-term effects on children. It can result in depression, anger, lost interest in schoolwork, or school avoidance. Lower self-esteem and depression can persist into the adult years. Some ideas can reduce bullying. Get older peers to serve as monitors for bullying and intervene when they see it taking place. develop school-wide rules and sanctions against bullying and list them throughout the school, form friendship groups for adolescents who are regularly bullied by peers, incorporate the message of an anti-bullying program into church, school, and other community activities where adolescents are involved. I think it has to go far beyond this. Like, I would start a counseling group for bullies. And if we can kind of break through that tough facade and actually begin to deal with their issues, that might help. Let's see. Okay, we have one more set of notes. The one thing that I would like to talk about is that isn't currently in the notes is finding one's gender identity in adolescence, prior to adolescence, after adolescence. But, you know, I have had many parents or guardians bring a younger child to me, or even as a school counselor, and they always wanted me to help the young child, and I'm talking like 8 years old, who might be struggling with gender identity. Might say, oh, I think I might be gay, I might be a lesbian, I think I want to be the opposite gender, all of these things. I found that yes, we need to support and accept them unconditionally, without, of course. And however, I don't think there should be any pressure for that young child to determine their gender identity before puberty, at least. And the way I go about counseling them and helping to facilitate facilitate awareness and lower anxiety would be, to encourage their exploration of identity. And no matter what they explore, it's okay. This is a process. They don't have to come up with a specific gender identity at such a young age. And oftentimes they feel pressured to decide. So I think just saying it's okay to explore this, and later on you can make a decision when you feel ready, but just encourage acceptance and unconditional positive regard, and encourage them to pursue this. In adolescence, things change because people want to date, and people are attracted to others, and so they feel a little more pressure. But it's still okay not to make a decision until they feel ready, when they feel ready to accept that decision. I remember working at a school where the students lived there, and it was a big deal that the administration decided to allow students who were dating to hold hands in the school building. Before, there was no contact. And of course, the very first day, and I expected this to happen, the principal runs in my office and says, Grafton, what do I do? I said they could hold hands, but now boys are holding hands with boys and girls are holding hands with girls. And, I said, well, are boys holding hands with girls? He says, yes. I'm like, well, that's good. Everybody's holding hands. And he didn't find that amusing. But But I said, well, it's too late to retract this now, or you might run into some difficulty. Uh, but but on the other hand, why not just fully support this? And as long as it doesn't go, beyond the rules, why not just accept it? And you know what? Everything worked out great. Students were happy. It didn't cause any problems. But that's just the small biases that you could see play out every day with subjects like this. Lots of studies showed that abuse did not change gender identity. However, it did lead to identity confusion. So it was more difficult to finalize that identity decision. So, for example, if there was abuse, male to female, female to male, male to male, female to female, it didn't change gender identity. All it did was cause identity confusion and trauma. However, if that was processed appropriately and the victim went through a healing process, there should not be a problem with gender identity. All right. I do talk about gender roles a lot more in the lecture on feminist theory in the theory class. If you don't have me for theories, you can access that lecture on my YouTube channel. Let's look at the very last set of notes on schools. It's a little history as well that I think we need to cover, and I'll share this screen. So from 1890 to 1920, almost every state developed laws that excluded youth from work, required them to attend school. The number of high school graduates increased by 600%. They were no longer working in factories. There's currently a debate, and 3 independent panels decided that secondary schools could actually be contributing to adolescent alienation and impeded the transition to adulthood. Adolescents should be given alternatives to high school warehouse environment, such as on-the-job training. A lot of this has to do with overcrowded schools, things like that. Back to Basics movement grew, stressing that the function of schools should be the rigorous training of intellectual skills through such subjects as English, math, science. It may have been a reaction to the open education process of the 1970s. I worked in East Hills Elementary School, which was one of the last schools without walls in Pennsylvania. It's closed now, but it was an interesting open environment. Open education process of the 70s based on British educational system, which allowed students to learn and develop at their own pace in a highly structured classroom. Unfortunately, in the U.S., open was often interpreted as tearing down classroom walls and allowing an unstructured environment, and that's the big difference. Educators Arthur Powell, Eleanor Farrar, and David Cohen coined the phrase shopping mall high school, meaning that schools provided an extensive diversity in curriculum, classes, activities, and choices for students. Unfortunately, choices made by the students themselves are not always informed or made for the appropriate reasons. Contemporary approaches, direct instruction approach, teacher-centered approach that is characterized by teacher direction and control, mastery of academic skills, high expectations for students' progress, maximum time spent on learning tasks. Cognitive constructivist approaches emphasize the adolescent's active cognitive construction of knowledge and understanding, and Piaget's theory is an example of cognitive constructivist approach. Social constructivist approaches focus on collaboration with others, focus on knowledge and understanding, and that's Vygotsky. American Psychological Association published Learner-Centered Psychological Principles, a framework for school reform and redesign. Transitions from one school environment to another can be stressful, like moving between elementary, middle, junior, and high school. It's kind of like this top dog, underdog phenomena. You get to 5th grade, top of the heap, go to middle school, you're back at the bottom. Aptitude, treatment, interaction, stresses, the importance of both adolescents' characteristics and motivation, the treatment or experiences they receive in schools. Aptitude refers to such characteristics as academic potential, personality characteristics on which students differ. Treatment refers to educational techniques such as structured versus flexible classrooms. Joan Lipsitch researched what made the best middle schools, found that the most successful showed a great willingness and ability to adapt all school practices to the individual differences in physical, cognitive, and social development of their students. It's hard to do when you have too many students. The Carnegie Council on Adolescent Development wrote Turning Points, Preparing American Youth for the 21st Century, and recommended smaller communities or houses to lessen the impersonal nature of large middle schools. Lowering student-to-counselor ratios, that's a good idea, from several hundred to 1 to 10 to 1. Well, even 100 to 1 would be pretty good. Involving parents and community leaders in schools, developing curriculum that produces students who are literate, understand the sciences, and have a sense of health, ethics, and citizenship. Having teachers team teach in more flexible design curriculum blocks that integrate several disciplines instead of presenting students with disconnected, rigidly separated 50-minute segments. Boosting students' health and fitness with more in-school programs, helping students who need public health care to get it. These all seem pretty reasonable. High school dropout rates, 1940, more than 60%. 25 to 29-year-olds had not completed high school. Today, this figure is approximately 15%. Causes include school-related, economic, family-related, peer-related, and personal reasons. That's a broad spectrum there. Almost 50% of dropouts asked cited school-related reasons for dropping out. I would say over 50%, but there might be a lot of personal reasons, like having to get a job because of lack of support. All right, that's a lot. And for your discussion posts, that's a lot of information. Did anything resonate with you? Did you have a comment on anything? Disagree with anything? Want to contribute in any way? Let me know. Put it in your discussion post and email me if you have any questions.